Than a wild goose chase, Christian Weston Chandler seemed to be in high spirits after his solo road trip. This was the most independent thing he had ever done, and this taste of freedom seemed to excite him. Even the trolls had to applaud Chris for being willing to step so far out of his comfort zone to rescue the woman he loved, even if it was just a prank. Their reasons for making him do it may have been cruel, but in a strange way, the end result seemed to be a positive one. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for what would come next, because on March 3rd, Chris was once again hacked, this time by Max, who took control of his website using his PlayStation Network account. This resulted in a long, infamous Skype call between the two of them. While Max's side of the recording is a bit unintelligible, whatever he was saying clearly made Chris viscerally upset. He told Chris that the miscreants were still holding Julie hostage and gave him a choice. He could either save Julie or get his accounts back. Ultimately, Chris chose to save Julie. After the decision was made, Max began threatening to put Chris's PSN account up for auction on eBay. Even though he had chosen Julie, Christian still begged the troll not to go through with it. He didn't even seem to mind if he didn't get it back. For some reason, he was just desperate for it not to be sold. And this is when Max saw an opportunity. He began making ludicrous demands of Chris in order to keep the account off of eBay, including dancing for him as well as making love with the manager of the game place. At some point, Max made fun of Chris by accusing him of not having genitals. While no video recording exists of this conversation, based on Max's reaction, it can be inferred that Chris exposed himself on camera to prove him incorrect. After some deliberation, Max's demands became focused on Chris's Sonic Chew medallion. He tossed around ideas for things Chris could do with his prized possession, including setting it aflame and ejaculating on it. Ultimately, the troll decided on the cruelest thing possible, making Chris insert the medallion into his anus. Despite the only thing at stake being a PlayStation Network account, Chris decided this was an acceptable trade-off. As just stated, no video of this ordeal exists online, but Max can be heard laughing with sadistic glee as Chris repeats how miserable this whole experience is making him. Eventually, other members of the miscreants joined the call, and were horrified by what they saw, quickly turning on Max and telling him to cut it out. The sadist wasn't willing to give up his depraved fun so easily though, as he continued making increasingly crueler demands of Chris, such as telling him to burn his own house down. Luckily, by this point, Chris was realizing the tides were turning in his favor and finally had enough, telling Max that he would no longer do as asked. With the jig being up, Max dropped the bombshell reveal on Chris Chan. Julie never existed. As it turns out, both his sweetheart and Max had been characters played by the troll Blue Spike, a boy that was only 13 years of age. Blue Spike then threatened to report Chris to the FBI, as he had been having sexual conversations and sending explicit material to a minor for months. Hearing what was going down, Clyde joined the call and attempted to reel in the teenager's antics. He tried in vain to convince Chris that Julie was real and still being held hostage in Ohio, but at that point the damage was done. The 13-year-olds had torn down the entire facade that Clyde spent months building up. Despite his cruel methods, on some level, Clyde seemed to believe he was helping Chris take some control of his life and gain maturity. But Blue Spike didn't care about that, as he merely wanted the autistic man to suffer. The following day, Christian had a chat over Mumble with the miscreants sans Blue Spike, where he stated he felt sick after the previous day's events. There was a notable change of tone from the pranksters here, as they were clearly treating Chris more nicely, presumably out of a sense of guilt. That didn't stop them entirely, of course. Clyde Cash mentioned that he had Blue Spike killed for what he had done, to which Chris could only respond, "That's sad." For a short while after this incident, the trolls chose to back off, and Chris made a conscious effort to talk to fewer people over the World Wide Web. But as always, it wouldn't be long until both sides were back to their old ways. In fact, a new troll would soon enter the picture.
citizens of YouTube, I must be quiet because it's at night. Excuse me for not talking loud, and I hope all you can hear me.
Robert Simmons was a man who contacted Chris because of the trolling, posing as an autistic Sonichu fan, and was able to quickly gain the global maintained a friendly correspondence over the internet until March 15, 2009, when Robert visited Chris's church in order to attend a service with Bob. Unbeknownst to the father and son, Robert was wearing a microphone to record the entire encounter. Nothing much of interest was said on this recording though. Robert and Bob chatted for a bit about the trolling Chris had been receiving, and Chris gave Robert his autograph. The real point of interest in this audio comes at the end, when Robert gets into his car and begins talking with an unidentified co-conspirator. The two of them appeared to be planning something, but at that point it was unclear exactly what this was. That same week, Chris received a phone call from a girl named Emily, asking if he'd be interested on going on a date with her. Still rebounding from Julie, Chris agreed, and the date was set for March 16th. It should go without saying at this point that Emily was a troll too. In fact, she was the one who had put the Encyclopedia Dramatica sign in Chris's yard a few months prior. The two decided to meet up at the now iconic Fashion Square Mall, Chris's former favorite spot for picking up women. When the day came, Chris arrived first, but quickly got too stressed out and left before Emily showed up. Even though she was a troll, this was still the closest thing to a real date Chris had ever been on. Upon arriving home, he posted a video apologizing to Emily, asking if they could reschedule for a new time for their date. In this upload, Chris also cites his parents as the reason for backing out at the last second.
But my mom was in disbelief, but yeah, also my father was in full belief, and still conflicting, all the conflicting opinions and whatnot. It just made me feel unsure.
He stated that if they did arrange a new day to go out on, he would not tell his mother about it. Shortly thereafter, the female troll and Chris got in contact once again, and the new date was set. On this second meeting attempt, it was Emily who arrived at the mall early. She wore a concealed microphone, and her friend covertly recorded the meeting in order to capture what they had planned. When Chris arrived, Emily and her cohorts were surprised to see him accompanied by Bob. The trio sat down for lunch at the food court, where Bob talked incessantly to Emily, with Chris barely getting a word in edgewise. Many speculated that the now elderly man liked to talk a lot because he was so starved for attention living with Chris and Barb that he would take any opportunity he could to interact with new people. Eventually, the father did leave the two alone, and Chris and Emily walked around the mall together. The romantically impaired man made some awkward attempts to flirt. He seemed to brag about taking a shower before the date, showed her his infamous Donald Duck impression, and compared her to a character from Sailor Moon. He also asked if he could put his hand on her shoulder, to which she responded, only for a little bit. After she told Chris that she was ready to go home. This was the cue for her partner, a man wearing to emerge from a nearby store and begin flirting with her. Chris was immediately suspicious of him, asking if he had any knowledge of Sonichu and 4chan, but he pretended to have no idea what Chris was talking about. He then tried to get the pickle man to back off, but Emily was clearly infatuated with him. The smooth-talking pickle man girlfriend stealer next inquired if she'd be interested in going to see a film with him, and much to Chris's dismay, Emily agreed. His first ever date left him fermented cucumber. After his failed love Chris move on to the next girl. And as it turns out, Ivy O'Neill had called the Chandler household to ask if Chris would art she had made, as well as the easiest way to win was to either appeal to his sexual desires or to send him Sonichu fan art. So of course he quickly became infatuated with the young lady. Almost immediately after they started talking, Ivy began testing the limits of what she could get Chris to do. On March 20th, only a few days after the relationship began, Chris posted a video telling her that he was in love. A week later, Chris recorded a cover of the song I Need a Hero at Ivy's request. He pretended to play music on his Guitar Hero controller. He also showed a few pages from a comic he was working on, in which he and Sonichu rescued Ivy from Clyde. It concluded with a drawing of a shirtless, unrealistically muscular Chris standing triumphantly with Ivy on the edge of a cliff, and waving his iconic sweater like a flag. Another video requested by his new sweetheart was a tour of Chris's house, which was posted on March 27th. This offered a rare insight into the everyday life and severe hoarding problems of the Chandler family. The kitchen counters were covered by layers of unwashed dishes. They had still not taken their Christmas tree down, and the living room was so full of clutter that it was no longer usable. It was at this moment that the miscreants realized that if this was Chris's reality, it's no wonder why he would rather live in a fantasy. This house tour actually got Chris in a bit of trouble a few months later in August, when his parents discovered it. It turns out that they were concerned that the health department might see the footage and force them to move out, and wanted him to figure out a way to fix it. The solution was to upload a video screaming at people about it.
Everyone here, my mother and my father are angry at me. They're blaming me. It's my fault. I admit it's my fault. I want everything about my house off the internet. I'll send in detectives. I'll send in police. I'll send in everything in my power to get it off the internet.
Listen to me.
Yes.
Shut that goddamn thing off. I don't care what you do. You get all that stuff off of there tonight.
I'm working on it.
Go work on it.
I am
Do
working.
you realize something? Let me tell you. If the health department of Greene County sees those videos that you put on the damn internet, they could condemn our house and we would have to move out of it.
I don't know where to
You
go.
loaded them up there, you unload them.
I'm working on it.
Go do it.
I am doing it. I'm sorry.
Get in here and do it. I don't want to get kicked out of my house by the health department. And what you just did was stick a knife in our back and kill us.
So yeah, please get everything off of the internet now.
After this video went live, the trolls began contacting the Greene County Health Department to report the Chandler family. Officials eventually did check the house out, but took no action due to the fact that the conditions of the home, terrible as they were, did not affect anyone beyond Chris, Bob, and Barbara. Going back to the spring of 2009, Chris rekindled his friendship with Joshua Martinez. This time, he managed to convince Chris that he had many friends in Hollywood, with him pretending to put the gullible man in contact with actress Vanessa Hudgens, and the two began a correspondence. Things rapidly became sexual between the two, with Chris even going so far as to tell the movie star that he loved her. However, the Sonichu creator quickly felt guilty about this and came clean to Ivy about the affair. He even posted a couple of videos on the subject. The first was him apologizing and had his blow-up doll stand in for Ivy. The second was him reading a Bible verse about how adultery is a sin. During this whole ordeal, the miscreants also leaked a series of private videos Chris had made for Ivy. The first of these showed Mr. Chandler drinking his own seed, in order to prove that he could change how it tasted based off of what he ate. Strangely though, he chose to mix it with orange Fanta. The second was of Chris naked in the shower, slow dancing to an imaginary Ivy. Finally, the third was of him, once again naked, spanking himself as punishment for cheating. If this wasn't embarrassing enough, they also leaked a series of photos showing Chris wearing nothing but his Sonichu medallion and an adult today. These were all punishments devised by Ivy to make up for the fact that he had an emotional affair with the star of High School Musical. All of this discipline only seemed to strengthen Chris's love for Ivy, as by April 24th, he posted a video of himself pretending to propose. He did this by producing a cover of the Celine Dion song It's All Coming Back to Me, which he played in the background. It was followed up by Chris showing off his latest comic, Sonic Chew Special Number 2, which told the story of his dream wedding. A few days later, the miscreants leaked the follow-up, Sonic Chew Special Number 3. This was made as a gift to Ivy, and was only ever meant to be seen by her. The story followed the couple's honeymoon, and them consummating the marriage. As shown prior, Chris wasn't afraid to make his comics sexual, and this was no exception. According to some, Ivy encouraged Chris to make the drawings of his genitals as accurate as possible. His solution was to place his manhood on the paper and trace over it. This resulted in his character's package being roughly the same size as his entire body, leading many fans to nickname it the Giant Penis Comic. By May, Chris decided he wanted to better control the online conversation surrounding him. With this, he created an account on Wikipedia named Chris Chan Sonic Chew, and attempted to write up a page about himself on the site. This was quickly deleted though, as it included excessively detailed personal information, and the Wikipedia admins assumed it was created by a troll. This was not a total loss though, as CogsDev, the creator of the Quickie, decided to take the opportunity to create a new website called Wikipedia, where Chris could post about himself all he liked. Aside from YouTube, this would be Chris's primary space for communicating with the public, and the new home for the Sonic Chew comic. This same month, Chris was tricked once again by Joshua Martinez, who sold him a PSP at a drastically inflated price. For some reason, this excessive spending was the final nail in the coffin for Ivy, who decided to break up with Chris soon afterward. He also cited his infidelity as another reason for leaving, but it can probably be assumed that the troll behind the Ivy persona had just gotten bored and needed an excuse to give it up. For the 2 days afterward, Chris called his ex non-stop, begging her to take him back. It got so bad that she eventually had to call Bob to make Chris leave her alone. In an instant, one of Chris's most serious relationships had ended, and he barely understood why. Accepting the rejection and trying to move on, Chris posted a video saying he would be resuming his love quest, more specifically looking for a smoke-free, non-alcoholic, non-black woman. Most importantly, he claimed that he would no longer be talking to ladies over the internet, and would only accept offers from those who approached him in real life. It seemed to many that he had finally learned his lesson. To back this up, Chris began expanding his social life and friend circle with his new gal pal, Kim Wilson, as well as a couple of her friends. The thing is, Kim was actually Emily, the girl Chris had gone on a date with a few months prior. But as baffling as it may sound, he did not seem to recognize her. Kim posted a series of vlogs depicting her time with Chris. Despite the fact that she was a troll, it seemed like she actually wanted him to enjoy himself. Most notably, one of these videos showed Chris drinking a Long Island iced tea, which was his first ever alcoholic beverage. After years of vilifying people who drank, this was a rare moment of Chris stepping out of his comfort zone. As Christian continued hanging out with Kim and her friends, he began getting a lot more confident. In July, a video was recorded with the help of a buddy titled Rollin' and Trollin', in which he gave a tour of Charlottesville while pretending it was Quickville. The most notable thing in this video was Chris's change in appearance. His famous blue and red striped sweater had been replaced with a blue t-shirt and a vest, and his Sonic Chew medallion had been exchanged for dog tags. He wore tattoo sleeves, sunglasses, spiked bracelets, had grown a goatee, and was altering his voice. This was all done in an attempt to convince the trolls that Chris Chan had been a character this whole time, and that, in reality, he was neurotypical and fully employed. Around this time, a troll going by the name Samantha Thaddeus hacked into Chris's PSN and Club Nintendo accounts. After some emailing back and forth, with them quoting Bible verses at each other, Chris was then put in contact with Samantha's father, Jack Thaddeus. Just like many of the other trolls in the past, Jack used his position of power to see what absurd things he could get Chris to do. This included included a gratuitous video of Chris humping his PlayStation 3 for 8 whole minutes straight, as well as one of him singing the song "It's Okay to Be Gay." As usual, the latter of these two uploads was not satisfactory, as Chris spent the whole gay announcement with his voice filled with disgust. Because of this, he demanded a second take. In this new version, Chris wore novelty nose and mustache glasses, a hat, and a skirt taken from his blow-up doll. He also changed the lyrics in the final line to "It's not okay to be gay," as he took off the glasses, all in an attempt to circumvent the troll's demand for him to come out of the closet. Jack next puppet show of making love, but this seemed to be a line Chris was not willing to cross, as he told Jack that getting his accounts back was not worth the humiliation. Even with that being said, Samantha's father was still able to convince Chris that this was a scheme to get his social security payments taken away, as he had apparently revealed himself to not actually have autism in his Rollin' and Trollin' video. In response, Chris posted an upload clarifying that he was, in fact, unemployed and autistic. Inexplicably, all of the audio in this video was entirely through ADR.
I don't have a job. So there, and I am high functionally autistic, and I'm nearsighted, still a virgin. So there you go.
To most onlookers, Jack wasn't anything too special when it came to Chris's ever-growing gallery of trolls. However, he did open the door to the next big saga. You see, as he and Chris continued emailing, Jack sent him a link to a new video by a brand new player in the story. A young man claiming that he was the real Christian Weston Chandler. It goes without saying that this very well.
Captain's log. Stardate. June 21st, 2009. My name is...
In the summer of 2009, one of Chris's most infamous adversaries appeared on the scene. This troll had actually been posting videos since June on the YouTube channel C-Chan Sonic Chew Quick, before gaining much of a following, but that would soon change. What made him stick out from the pack was that he pretended to be Chris, doing a near spot-on imitation at that, copying his quirks and manner of speaking. He wore a brown and yellow striped sweater which he padded out with a pillow to make himself appear obese, and had a paper Sonic Chew medallion around his neck. He mimicked Chris's past antics, such as his song "So Need a Cute Girl," the time he was forced to make a video saying that he was gay, and his eternal feud with Clyde Cash. Trolls began referring to him as Liquid Chris, with the original now being referred to as Solid Chris, a reference to the Metal Gear video game series. The first upload that Solid Chris saw from Liquid was one in which he was claiming to sell Sonic Chew merchandise. As was displayed in the Jimmy Hill saga almost a year prior, Chris could not stand the idea of others profiting off his characters. He quickly posted an angry upload decrying Liquid.
Do not buy any more from this crappy imposter. Do not give him any more money. And he said he's going to give it to, quote-unquote, his congregation with my Elizabeth Foss. It's my congregation, not his. Who does imposter think he is? Down with him. Burn in hell.
Apparently, Chris still hadn't caught up to the established pattern, as this response only added fuel to the fire, and made Liquid go further with his scheme. Anytime Christian posted a video, Liquid would post one of his own to one-up him. For example, on July 29th, Chris made a recording of himself playing the song "More Than a Feeling" on Guitar Hero. Mere hours later, Liquid had posted one himself, playing the same song on an actual guitar. Trolls quickly took notice of how angry Chris got at the idea that people might believe Liquid to be the real Christian Weston Chandler. As such, they decided to start circulating a rumor that Solid Chris was actually named Ian Brandon Anderson, due to the the fact that his then current YouTube channel was called IBA Chandler. It didn't take long for Chris to get completely fed up with Liquid's shenanigans. To decide once and for all who the imposter was, he devised a scheme challenging Liquid to a musical competition, which he dubbed the SingStar Challenge. The rules to this contest were odd and convoluted, and seemed specifically tailored to benefit Chris. It would consist of 5 rounds, and in each one both contestants would choose a new song to sing. As a finale, they would each choose a song for their competitor. In addition, they were not allowed to use instruments, but were required to have an MP3 of the song playing in the background. Finally, the contest was to have 6 judges, with both Chris and Liquid selecting 3. Christian chose his friend Kim Wilson, one of her male friends who remained unnamed, and a new online gal pal named Kate Bay. Liquid selected his girlfriend Casey, his friend Seth, and an animator by the name of SpazKid. Chris decided to end this video by asserting his dominance over Liquid. He took a razor and, without the use of shaving cream, aggressively shaved the goatee he had been growing for the past few weeks. With the gauntlet thrown, the SingStar Challenge was officially on. To put it simply, the competition was heated, and lasted throughout the first week of August. Chris, of course, tried whatever tactic he could think of to hinder Liquid's chances of success. In the second round, Liquid chose to sing the theme song from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Christian angrily took to the video's comments to accuse him of cheating, since he claimed that theme songs were not allowed by the rules. Even though Chris himself had decided the rules specifically to benefit him, it seemed as though he was willing to bend them any way he saw fit. Nevertheless, the judges did not agree with his objection. The challenge proceeded normally for the next few days until the 5th and final round. As previously established, this was when Chris would choose a song for Liquid to sing and vice versa. It was without a doubt the most hotly contested round of the entire SingStar saga, beginning with Chris performing the tune Liquid chose for him, Smell Yo Dick by Risque. However, he opted to change the titular lyric to duck due to his discomfort with the phallic implication. Liquid was quick to call him out on this, forcing Chris to post a new version in which he sang the uncensored lines even though he clearly didn't want to. As for Liquid, Chris chose for him to perform Lift Up Your Eyes by the Planetshakers. However, he did not sing the entire song, as the full version was almost 10 minutes in length. This provoked a furious response from Christian, who demanded that Liquid redo his entry with the full version or be disqualified. Chris also claimed that he had gotten the police involved. The autistic man's imposter new video with the complete song, and the SingStar Challenge was officially complete. All that was left was for the judges to cast their votes. In the end, Liquid Chris was declared the winner after 4 of the 6 judges selected him. The deciding vote came from Kate Bay, Solid Chris's newest online gal pal. He begged her over email to change her mind, but she wouldn't budge. According to his own rules, this officially made Liquid Chris the true and honest Christian Weston Chandler. Of course, Ian Brandon feet laying down. Despite losing fair and square, he quickly uploaded another video to prove that he was the one and only Chris Chan. To accomplish this, he publicly stated his address and phone number, inviting anybody to come over to his house and meet him. Unlike most other times when personal information about Mr. Chandler was revealed, this was not done through leaks or manipulation. Chris was simply so irate at the idea of anybody believing that he was not the real Christian Chandler that he willingly doxed himself. Meanwhile, after achieving victory in the SingStar Challenge, Liquid Chris posted an update video about his life. He thanked the judges for voting for him and stated that he had recently proposed to his sweetheart Casey. On top of this, he also claimed to have gotten a job at a video game studio in Redmond, Washington. This was most likely a reference to the Miyamoto saga earlier. He concluded that, due to his new career move, he would officially be leaving the internet to focus on his new life. Liquid walked off camera as the song "We'll Meet Again" played ominously in the background, seemingly indicating that his saga was not quite finished just yet. Over the course of the SingStar Challenge, Solid Chris came in contact with Liquid's sweetheart, Casey. They began talking frequently over the phone and email. She joined him on one of his days out with Kim Wilson in real life. As they got to know each other better, it was clear that Chris's feelings for his new gal pal became more than just a platonic friendship. Casey was able to leverage this affection, learning even more details about the Chandlers' private life. During the phone calls, Chris was more than happy to talk to Casey about his daily habits. According to him, he had been taking medication for high cholesterol due to the fact that pretty much all of his meals came in the form of fast food. When Casey reacted in shock, Chris was quick to clarify he often ordered salads from these establishments. Apparently, the reason for this constant eating out was due to the already established clutter in the Chandler kitchen, which made it impossible for any cooking to be done. When questioned about his physical activity, Chris stated his only exercise came from his daily walks around the neighborhood, which were enough for him to work up a sweat. Solid Chris didn't seem to see a problem with his lifestyle, but Casey became determined to get him to eat better and exercise more. She offered to take Chris jogging, an idea which he was initially hesitant about since he was worried his chest would bounce around too much. However, once Casey suggested he could wear a sports bra, he rapidly warmed up to the idea. He quickly purchased a piece of the female apparel, sent Casey a photo of himself wearing it, and commented on how confident it made him feel. Casey also encouraged Chris to get out of the house more. He began attending what he described as a relationship development class, which he hoped would help build up his confidence about talking to women in person. He compared it to his idea of dating education class, a concept he had been trying to get schools to implement for years alongside sex ed. Chris also applied for a job at Target. Going through with this took a lot more convincing from Casey than she first thought, as Chris was concerned that getting a job would impact his monthly Social Security checks. He never received a call back, but it cannot be overstated how much of a big step it was for Chris to apply in the first place, considering he had been arrested at Target only a few years prior. In October, after months away from the internet, Liquid Chris returned with a new video. He claimed that he had not made it to his job in Redmond, Washington, as while riding the bus there, he had been drugged and kidnapped by Solid Chris. He then stated that he woke up in the Sahara Desert with blood oozing from his anus. Chris was quick to deny the story.
I mean, come on, his story. I mean, like, you know, being put in a meat factory, Sahara Desert, Aladdin people? Huh. And also, he could easily take the drugs himself.
Upon his return, Liquid immediately reignited the feud, claiming that Casey had begun to fall in love with Solid Chris during his time away. But as soon as Liquid returned, she immediately fell back in love with the winner of the contest. This worked incredibly well in riling up the potential Target employee. He soon publicly stated his love for Casey, and the battle for her affection was on. Like their previous battle, this was really nothing more than the two of them making videos back and forth. On October 29th, Christian uploaded a diss track against Liquid, sung over the song Walk This Way. By the end, it simply devolved into Chris flipping through his playlist and using each new song to insult Liquid. It was here that Chris claimed Casey was now dating him, which was not true at all. Liquid was quick to respond with his own diss track, rapping to the beat of Eminem's My Name Is. As Solid vs. Liquid round 2 progressed, Casey and the Miscreants devised a way to up the ante, when on November 4th, she called Chris and said she wanted him to meet her parents. This was when Casey handed her phone off to a fellow prankster posing as her father, Matthew. It was almost immediately apparent that the point of this chat was to make Christian as uncomfortable as possible. disapproval. Every time he revealed a new detail about his life, Matthew would grill him on it and express his disapproval. After enduring this for nearly an hour, Chris told Matthew that he had crossed a line. This did not go over well, and the call ended with both Casey and her father being upset. The saga came to a head on November 10th when Chris and Casey had their final phone call. Christian remained largely silent as she grilled him about his behavior towards her father, and how he had seemed to take no significant steps in improving his lifestyle. She informed Chris that she and Liquid would be getting married soon, and that she no longer wanted to be his friend. Later that day, Chris posted a tear-filled video giving Casey and Liquid his blessing.
Congratulations on your wedding. I wish you and Chris all the happiness in the world.
The supposed reason for Chris Chan making this video was to share the other things he wanted to tell Casey before she hung up on him. It seemed like this ordeal had once again left Chris emotionally destroyed. But as Casey even predicted, it wouldn't be long until he had forgotten about all of this and moved on to his next big saga.
Captain's Log stardate, November 12th, 2009. It's now time for fan mail. Well, not much fan mail, as it is a little something from the Virginia Library of Congress.
Only a couple days after Liquid Chris had ended his storyline, our protagonist uploaded a new video in which his mood seemed to have done a complete 180. Christian happily displayed a letter showing he had officially registered the name Sonichu with the Virginia Library of Congress. From the very beginning, people had mocked the idea of Sonichu, saying there was no way Chris would be allowed to make money off of the characters without being sued by both Nintendo and Sega. Chris had always refuted this though, saying that Sonichu was different enough from the pre-existing properties that it could stand on its own. He seemed to believe that this registration completely validated him, but it's important to note that it was far from a copyright. On November 23rd, Chris noticed some new advertisements that were being showcased on Wikipedia. One depicted Peter Griffin from Family Guy supporting gay rights, and the other showed a Pickleman mascot promoting a contest for a free trip to Mexico. Chris was irate that these messages were being displayed on his website, and emailed the system's operator, CogsDev, to get them taken down. In response, the admin told him that there was nothing to be done, as the ad space had been purchased legally by Chris's old enemy, Jack Thaddeus. This opened a brand new door for trolls as they found yet another way to drive their target insane. Shortly thereafter, Chris uploaded a video asking his fans for donations in order to remove the ads. Strangely, he chose to single out his European fans, as it seemed he had recently developed a fascination with Europe and its currency. He also expressed his interest in finding official sponsors for the website, with his eyes set on Coca-Cola. As the months continued, Chris's fury at these gay pride ads only grew stronger. In one video, he even claimed that he taped pieces of paper to his computer screen so he didn't have to see them whenever he logged on to the site. By the end of the year, he had reached his limits, editing Wikipedia himself, removing Jack's ads, and replacing them with fake advertisements for Coke and the James Cameron film Avatar. These were quickly taken down, and Chris was informed by CogsDev that they had received a cease and desist order from Coca-Cola, although this was most likely a lie. After this incident, Chris's administrative privileges were revoked. Also around this general time period, Chris began doing a daily mailbag on the Wikipedia. Basically, this was his opportunity to respond to fan emails, speaking with them directly and answering their questions. He would usually give short responses, rarely more than a single sentence, and many wondered if he actually cared at all about it or if it was just simply something CogsDev talked him into. The most interesting bit of information from these, though, was the revelation that Christian had a bizarre and irrational hatred of people with Asperger's syndrome. He seemed to believe that their struggles were nothing compared to those of people with autism, and he despised the fact that the two were often lumped together. This is when an artist by the name of Alec Benson Leary created a comic called Asperchew, taking advantage not only of Chris's hatred of Asperger's, but also his insistence that he owned the copyright to Sonichu. This comic was clearly a parody of Chris in his life, with the Asperchew character even looking like Christian. These illustrations in the publication also included a human character that too had an uncanny resemblance to Chris Chan, named Ian Brandon Anderson. Upon discovering Asperchew, Chris became enraged. Alec began emailing him apologetically, trying to smooth things out between the two of them. In these emails, Alec included art of Asperchew and Sonichu together, which only angered Chris further, as he believed they were trying to portray the two as being in a homosexual relationship.
You have done wrong with this drawing. It only depicts the opposite of straight, you DA. There may be a human character coming into the books with Asperger's, but there will certainly never be a Sonichu or Roastechu with that ailment.
Later in December, Chris received an email from a young man named Evan claiming that Chris had stolen his character and used it in his comic without permission. Evan was actually the first person to ever send Chris Sonichu fan art all the way back in 2008. Among these drawings was one of Evan's original Sonichu character, a hedgehog with drills for hands named Simonchu. A short time later, Chris had introduced his own character with drills for hands named Simon Law. The resemblance between the two was undeniable, and it was obvious to any passive observer that Chris had ripped off Evan. Because of this, he requested that Chris kill off his Simon Law character, but he vehemently refused, calling Evan a monster for even suggesting such a thing. While he scoffed off Evan's demand for now, this would not be the end of the feud. At the start of 2010, the ad space on the Wikipedia, once belonging to Jack Thaddeus, was purchased by a new advertiser. This would normally be a relief for Chris, that is, if it wasn't for the person who had taken over the sponsorship, Alec Benson Leary, who quickly co-opted Chris's website to advertise Asperchew comics, as well as his new website, Asperpedia. This spurned Chris to create a video in which he raged against these advertisements. He accused Alec of being nothing more than a plagiarist, and called Asperchew a dirty parody of Sonichu. This was a strange choice of words for Chris, as in the past he had defended Sonichu's existence with the very same parody reasoning. As always, Chris emailed Cogsdev to try to get these new ads taken down to no avail. No matter how much he pleaded, she would not budge, claiming that Alec had paid for the ad space all the way through the year, and that Chris would just have to live with it. This only served to anger him further, as he made another video a few days later threatening to ruin Alec before punching the camera.
I'm gonna ruin you, Larry. Angry.
The longer Alec's ads stayed up on the Wikipedia, the angrier Chris became. On January 15th, he posted another video directed at not just Alec, but a few of his friends as well. These included Asperpedia's webmaster Mao Ling, Sean August Watley, a frequent Asperpedia contributor, and Evan. Together, these men would later be known as the Asperpedia 4. The upload concludes with Chris challenging all of them to a fight to decide once and for all who was superior. He even read out his home address yet again so they could come face him directly. As January continued, Chris posted more and more uploads about his hatred for Alec and the Asperpedia 4. In fact, mere hours later, he made a rant in which he spoke a Spanish phrase backwards that he believed translated to "love Sonichu and hate Asperchew." Confused, trolls were able to trace this back to an episode of The Simpsons, where a similar backwards speaking tactic is used to try to brainwash people to join the Navy. On the 17th, Chris uploaded yet another video about his feelings toward Alec. In this one, he reviewed the Asperchew comic, detailing every single thing he hated about it. Of course, the main thing he took offense to was how it depicted him, specifically citing the fact that Asperchew had a quote-unquote Buddha belly. He went on to criticize its anti-religious themes, as well as the excessive violence and nudity. To that last point, Chris did address the fact that Sonic-Chew had seen its fair share of nudity as well. However, he had defended it by stating it had all been censored, seemingly ignoring the fact that he had originally posted it all uncensored. The irate man concluded this video by claiming he would be getting the FBI involved in the case, and telling Alec that the spirit of his dog Patty would haunt his nightmares and eat his soul. After this, Chris and Alec finally began communicating with each other directly over the phone. Their first conversation began on the subject of the promotions placed on the Wikipedia. Surprisingly, Chris seemed ready to compromise on this matter, saying he wouldn't mind so much if the ads were regulated only to the site's sidebars. In addition, he also said that he should be able to run his own ads on Asperpedia just to make things fair. To both of these points, Alex seemed to be willing to cooperate, although it appears nothing much came of it. These discussions next moved on to the subject of Alex's use of Sonic-Chew characters in his comic. Chris demanded he stop, or at least change their names, but Alex stood his ground. For some reason, the topic was shifted to Alec and Chris pointing out the various lore differences between the two universes, such as the fact that in his world, Sonic-Chew was a Pokemon, while in Alec's, he was just a species of animal. This led the troll to his next argument. If Chris insisted that Sonic-Chew was a Pokemon, how could he then claim to own the full copyright to him? Chris obviously had no answer to this question, as he uncomfortably tried to shift the topic back to the original subject of the ads, but Alec continued pressing, and eventually Chris made up a lie about his cell phone running out of battery, ending the discussion. Their next call would take place around a week later. Chris expressed his displeasure with the name Asperchew on the grounds that it was leaning towards the character. He seemed to be arguing from the perspective that Asperchew had the same feelings as a real person, citing the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit to bolster his point. When Alec tried to make Chris see that there was a difference between the thoughts and feelings of real people and fictional characters, Chris simply called him naive. Realizing that this conversation was going nowhere, Alec shifted the topic to Chris's continued use of Simon Law in his comic despite Evan's objections. Chris dug his heels in, insisting that Simon Law had not been inspired in any way by Simon Chew. Alec pointed out by Chris's own logic that there was a possibility Asperchew was not based on Sonic-Chew. On top of that, he also read off of Chris's official Wikipedia page about Simon Law, where he directly credited Simon Chew as being the basis for the character. Chris was once again backed into a corner, and he was forced to say he would consider writing Simon Law out of his comic. As these regular phone calls continued, Alec began asking Chris to publicly apologize for the things he had said about the Asperpedia 4. He eventually relented to this point, but Alec was not happy with the apology he made, as he spent most of the video expressing his continued frustration with the ads on the website. It seemed to him that Chris Chan was not actually sincerely sorry, and was only apologizing in the hopes that it would make Alec remove his advertisements. The second apology was equally poor. He was at least able to name the things he was sorry for, specifically the threats he made against Alec and his theft of Evan's Simon Chew character. He carefully worded it as to not technically give up the rights to Simon Law, only Simon Chew. As if this weren't enough, just a few hours earlier, Chris had made a video cursing and threatening Mao over new pro-gay ads that were appearing on the Wikipedia. Eventually, Alex stopped asking Chris for more apology videos, as it became increasingly clear that he would never learn his lesson. The way the man spoke to Chris was like a parent disciplining a child. Unlike many of the other trolls who just wanted to see a reaction, it seemed like Alec had a genuine desire to make Chris see the error of his ways. But as you would soon discover, this strategy didn't work. February 25th, 2010 was a big day in Chris Chan history, as it marked the publication of Sonic-Chu number 10, which would prove to be one of the most bombastic comics he had ever made, because it attempted to exact revenge on practically every troll who had ever wronged him over the past year. The story opens with Chris being released from the time void he had been trapped in several issues prior. He detailed what had transpired while he was away, how he had traveled to the future and met his wife, a woman named Lovely Webb. She was a scientist working on a vaccine for homosexuality, which she was finally able to complete using a sample of Chris's pure straight blood. Chris then traveled back to the present and used the vaccine on his nemesis Natsirk, turning him heterosexual again and as a result, redeeming his character. Later in the issue, Chris stated that he meant no offense to his homosexual fans, and that he only included this plot point in order to convince his trolls that he wasn't gay. It didn't work. Next, he grabbed his trusty Guitar Hero controller, which transformed him from a drawing to a photograph of himself. Chris and his band, the Hedgehog Boys, played his original song, Revive Zordon, a Power Rangers parody of Cat Scratch Fever by Ted Nugent. The tune was played so loud that it caused the 4-cent garbage building to crumble. As everything collapsed around them, Clyde Cash and Jack Thaddeus grabbed one another by the hand and fell to their deaths. In Chris's mind, this was meant to humiliate them, implying that they were gay just before killing them off. To his dismay, though, most readers thought this came off as a surprisingly touching and tragic end to the two characters. Once the tower came down, Chris lamented the fact that the trolls forced him to do such a thing, and added the detail that there were 1,500 people inside the 4-cent garbage headquarters when it was destroyed. The final part of the story came when Chris traveled to the home of Alec Benson Leary and wiped all of the contents of Asperpedia from the internet. Despite the fact that this issue was all about him getting back at the trolls, he did use this section to somewhat honor the wishes of Alec and Evan by killing off Simon Law. Yet he did this in his own spiteful way, depicting Evan as the one to kill her by planting and exploding Pokemon in her bathroom. Following the lengthy courtroom scene, the entire Asperpedia 4 were found guilty of Simon Law's murder and sentenced to death. Each of them received a different grisly fate. Alec was put in an electric chair, with 10 of Chris's characters simultaneously pushing the button to end his life. Evan was chained to a wall and sliced to pieces by Simon Law's husband and her recently born daughter, Sandy. Sean was also chained to a wall and shot multiple times, leaving his body bloody and riddled with bullets. Finally, Chris personally used his psychic powers to mutilate and butcher Mal. Upon reading this, Alec called the comic book creator once again, this time to talk about his shock at how he and his friends were depicted in Sonic-Chu 10.